A pleasure to meet all at last, and here we are once again with video games that are totally awesome. And so, for this very instance, I would like to talk a bit about a certain Japanese related game that's more or less a mixture of French, Japanese, and American in terms of, well, it being a game entirely. You can consider this a multicultural hodgepodge in a way, but that's mostly because of the fact that this game was made by a French developer, published by a certain familiar sound, and then of course was based on a certain late 70s Japanese anime, UFO Robot Grendizer. Yeah, this basically follows the story of Duke Fleed and his massive army having to leave their own home planet in solace to find a more peaceful life, as their overwhelming forces could not be controlled. And in doing so, Duke Fleed, the leader of the army and the owner of the planet, would basically find himself on Earth. And eventually, he would find himself family, a large group of scientists whom are working on various projects. But ever since the arrival of Fleed himself, they now have to divert a lot of their attention to the war that's mostly on his hands. The blood that is spilled towards him is now practically being spread to most of the others involved. And while it's mostly unintentional, they're more than welcoming and helpful to him, with open arms and etc. They even allow Fleed himself to live in their own farm, and also do some work every now and then. And it's safe to say that the story of Duke Fleed, as well as his great robot known as Grendizer, the famous UFO robot, you could say it was a mixture of the likes of robots and aliens all put together here, but really, what we have here is quite a unique story, in which that it goes from a guy having to flee his planet to landing on Earth and eventually coordinating some efforts and a means to strike back against the overwhelming forces of evil. The evil in particular are a massive group of forces, which of course are some pretty nasty figures. One could basically argue the fact that this game, in its full title, UFO Robot Grendizer, The Feast of the Wolves, which itself is kind of a big title. It's certainly not the largest out there, the longest that one could say that rolls off their tongue, but it still does kind of give a bit of a difficult feel to it in terms of statements. To some, it might be a bit uncomfortable, while to others, like myself, it's not exactly much of a problem here. This game itself, as I mentioned before, was made by a French developer known as En-Road, and had been published, at least here in North America, by Microids. Yeah, you know those guys. They were the same people who had made a bunch of Smurfs games, as well as the game Tintin Reporter Cigars of the Pharaoh, which is essentially one of our more recent tie-ins with the famous Adventures of Tintin, and they've also been responsible for various other things over the years, even creating an Inspector Gadget game. So, let's be real here. We could think of Microids not quite being like the crappy nature that had been involved over the years with the likes of OG and Game Mill, but Microids ain't exactly the top of the list when it comes to well-known developers. This is a kind of developer that's made a lot of licensed games over the years, gotten the rights to various franchises. The fact that they got Tintin and Inspector Gadget and Smurfs is one thing, but to have a Japanese anime series which wasn't all that well known until more recently, in the late 70s was quite a point in which that Japanese anime started to become rather common. And within 20-something years, the United States would get a hold of anime and start creating one heck of a movement. A movement that to this day still is breathtaking. And let me tell you, my own experiences with anime over the years were mainly made possible from various games I played over the years. And while I will say that such franchises like Witch, Dragon Ball, Final Fantasy, Persona, and of course, Elfen Lied, these are the kind of anime that I've been well known for over the years. I've talked a lot about them, and I've also had lots of things to share here. made some blog posts here and there, even on Quora. And on top of all that, there's been tons of inclusion of such content made from these franchises here on my channel. So, you could say Robot Grendizer was another nice inclusion to have here. The game itself is released in November of 2023, and I bought my copy of the game by February 2024, so only about 3 months had passed by this point. And let me tell you about the game itself. As I said before, it stars Duke Fleet, who was a part of the High Guard, the royalty basically, that rules over the land of Planet Fleet itself. Unfortunately, because of the evil overwashing forces that have been invading the landscape, Fleet himself can only retreat into his famous weapon, a walking robot that is able to do all sorts of crazy stuff. It can punch, it can kick, it can go for various special attacks, including the Grendizer punch, which is basically when the enemy is grabbed up, he thrusts into the air and slams him down, sort of like a pile driver move. But of course, we will say that in spite of the many enemies that he faces, it becomes so overwhelming that not only are Fleet's parents killed, but of course, he has to evacuate the planet. It becomes incredibly painful for him. And I will say that the game itself, up until that very point, was quite shocking. But fear not, we do get to see other characters around here and there. There are various characters that you can interact with while in the lab in particular. The home base of which that is essentially Grendizer's new home, along with Fleet's new home base to work on various plans and also to coordinate efforts to fight back against his enemies. I will say that the game itself does have itself some variety. At first, we are given a unique third-person perspective with beat-em-up and shooter characteristics to it, but the fact that we do sometimes play as Duke himself, he basically runs around in an overhead sort of perspective. The same thing goes on when he goes over to his farm, and the farm itself is run by quite a few people here and there. There's a lot of faces to talk to, and a lot of things to learn about based on their personality as well as their many interests in life. And also, how does Duke make such good acquaintanceships with them and friendships with them? But the thing is, probably one of the most important characters that Duke has to be on the lookout for is Koji. This guy operates his own UFO. Yeah, kind of strange that the unique flying saucer that has been interpreted in countless alien-related situations, it certainly has become quite popular in the faces of pop culture. But the main thing is that this whole game gives us a big perspective on what Fleet has to accomplish. As we go through each level, and each world in particular, there's a variety of different activities that we have to do here. In all the different stages, sort of like in how Sonic Frontiers works, there's multiple maps relating to multiple levels, and within each of these levels, there's a variety of different important tasks to complete. There's also side quests, some collectibles, as well as other various optional things that you can do as well. Sometimes they'll offer you some bonuses. As you probably know by now, this is one of those games in which that it's not only open world, beat 'em up, and shooter, but it also is pretty RPG in and of itself. There's a lot of ways to customize Grendizer itself, as well as upgrade it to many different capabilities. There's a lot of ways to boost its functions based on attack and defense, as well as special attacks that you can add on just as well. Just make sure to have the right button combinations put together. Other such special abilities are available for unlocking just as well. And then of course, there are certain special techniques that may be required in the faces of learning how to defeat certain enemies. Because with each new level that you go through, there's tons of enemies to face. And moreover, there's a lot of people that you need to save. Grendizer itself is quite a popular attraction amongst the world. Planet Earth is more than lucky to have quite a savior like Grendizer. Of course, the biggest thing that we have to look out for is the fact that there's countless cutscenes that involve lots of text. And while this is for the most part how cutscenes within the game itself work, There's plenty of different animated moments that come around, including when Duke enters the Grendizer bot itself, as he transforms from a flying UFO to its own robot form and lands on the ground. It's a unique moment that's been done countless times throughout the anime, and here in the game, we get more or less this sort of thing just as well. Anyways, though, I will admit, there's probably not a whole lot you can do with a game like this, and the fact is, it carries on for a good amount of time, going through several different levels, and going to make a ton of different things happen. And at the same time, one could probably argue that sure, there's a monotony factor to it, and possibly a boredom factor to it, but I'm the one who has persisted all the way to the very end, in which the final boss is a main villain himself. A main villain. Because the true antagonist of the game unfortunately ended up losing his leadership, and a certain other figure tended to step in and boost the crap out of these overwhelming forces. And I know what you're probably thinking, why not just call them by their name? Unfortunately, like I've said, it's been over a year since I last played the game itself, and I managed to beat the entire thing in as little as a week. So, a good amount of gameplay has been put together for this, and Grendizer, when it came down to, I spent almost 12 hours altogether, in total. And that's because even after I'd already beaten the game, there were still a good amount of things to do just as well. I didn't quite stick around to 100% it. The best I did was 89%. Probably not the best, but still, there's not a whole lot left that I could have done. Some side quests could have been done, some collectibles could have been found, as well as some more progression that would have eventually allowed me to get as much points to make all the upgrades to Grendizer. And why exactly would I need to do that? What kind of thing do I have to prove here to make something like that happen? Well, in any case, I'm more than glad of what I was able to accomplish given the unique track record of such games that came from such developers. Like I've said, there's been a ton of crap that's been released by OG, Game Mill, Microids, unfortunately, ain't much on the chopping block, but it also ain't really high on the list. Yeah, even by my standards, I'm the one who's known for redeeming such horrid trash. But unfortunately, even in this case, there's only so much I can do. I will admit, though, I might try to go and watch the anime at some point. Maybe UFO Grendizer, the anime, might give us a good reason as to allow us to find out why the game itself was made. But let's be real here. It's a French-Japanese-American collab project, all conglomerated into a not too average Microids piece, but I can't say it's all that good. So, for my scoring of UFO Robot Grendizer, based on the summary of what the game itself has to offer, there's lots of worlds to explore, there's lots of things to take down, lots of beating up you have to do, so the monotony factor does kick in pretty much due to it being a beat it up, but at the same time, with the many characters to get into, to understand, and to speak with, you get a full understanding of what the story is like, in the anime or otherwise, as well as the many characters' personalities and interests in life. You really do get a good perspective of how to work things out. And in the end, it's a big battle, a warfare, with many bosses to fight, many things to do, including saving people from cruise ships, Ferris wheels, and etc., to working yourself out and defeating the bad guys, once and for all. While it's not technically over, as there are still a lot of remnants of what's left of the main antagonists, as we do see some of the final cutscenes give us that exact sort of thing. I can't be sure if a sequel could be in the works as a result of this, or something else. Who really knows? But for my overall scoring of UFO Robot Grendizer, The Feast of the Wolves, I'm just going to go ahead and label it at a 6.8 out of 10.1. While not exactly the best way to create a game based off a well-known anime, at least back then it was well-known, But to most of us, we didn't really know it as much as, let's say, Dragon Ball or Pokemon or even Yu-Gi-Oh! But we will admit, UFO robot Grendizer, or just Grendizer as we'll refer to it for short, will still be something rather interesting to look into in the future. I myself will probably make some time to marathon through the series, and maybe if I bring back TV shows that deserve the spotlight, I'll gladly take a good look into it and explain everything that I've seen and give it its own rating, just so we can compare it to this game and see if the anime itself does better. Until then, though, there's a lot more that I have to do. I'm probably going to be talking about the Turok games from here on out. So for the rest of the week, expect me to be doing just that. Until that happens, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.